Welcome everybody to our Illinois Town Hall. I'm Jeff Finkle, CEO of the Arcview Group, and I'm really excited about today's program, and I think you're all going to really enjoy it. To begin, let me first just introduce you, or reintroduce you as the case may be, to the Arcview Group, which has evolved quite a bit over the last 2 years, as has our industry in total, and many of you, our viewers. So the Arcview Group is really a financial services firm that operates 3 subsidiaries. Arcview Capital, our FINRA licensed broker-dealer, which provides investment banking services and is soon to launch our crowdfunding site. Arcview Ventures, our principal investing group and operator of the Arcview Collective Fund, a member-managed venture capital fund with 78 active limited partner members. And Arcview Management Consulting, our consulting group offering cannabis license pursuit and growth management services. All of this supported by our thought leadership, event, and membership programs, an example of which is our town hall today. So, as I said at the beginning, I really love the town hall programming. I think this is our 7th in the series. I think we've programmed New Jersey, Colorado, New York, Oklahoma, Arizona, and Michigan, and now Illinois. And we're programming Massachusetts next month, I believe on October 14th. And I think we'll revisit New York shortly as the Cannabis Control Board and its newly appointed chairman develop the rules of engagement for the program. There's going to be a lot to talk about. But the reason I love these town halls is that the content is perfectly on point and very useful for local operators, investors, and business hopefuls in their region of focus. Not exactly hyper-local, but clearly local. We get really positive audience feedback for these events. In addition to our town hall series, our digital content also includes our broader Arcview Access events and our fireside chats, which are themed to cover a variety of topics. And rounding out our digital events is our CEO Circles and Tales from the Top, on which we get to hear the challenges endured by many great C-suite executives and successful entrepreneurs from our industry. And we will co-produce a number of live events and themed salon events and VIP dinners. So stay tuned for details on all those programs. Let me just give you a quick overview of some of the upcoming events. Eric, if you could go back to that slide, thank you. Yep, so on October 30th, so I guess tonight we have our Pitch Fest event, which is at 3 o'clock Pacific time, Women's Inclusion Network. On September 30th, we have our fireside chat with Headset, which will be featuring David Abernathy, a managing director from our management consulting group, with Jewel Laurie and Liz Connors from Headset. October 14th, Massachusetts Town Hall. And certainly October 20th and 21st will be at MJ BizCon. And of course, please come visit us at our booth and stop by. We'd love to see you. Let me also mention that the second Arcview Founders Institute Cannabis Accelerator cohort is now taking applications. I think the application deadline is October 10th. And finally, we are relaunching our membership program that we've extended beyond just investors and offering it to all people interested in the business of cannabis with a bunch of new features, including access to replays of our content. So stay tuned for that. Please check your emails for information about these and other upcoming programs. Let me take this moment before we begin the formal program to thank our alliance partners for supporting these events. If anyone on this call is interested in learning more about our alliance partner program, please contact Jake Kusarek, our VP of Business Development. Erica, maybe you could put Jake's email in our chat box. Okay. All right, let's move on to the program, and it is a good one. Illinois is doing great. In August, sales were the highest to date. Tax revenues are becoming more and more meaningful, but with success comes challenges, right? So today, our events team and our moderator, Jeanne Sullivan, have put together a great panel to talk about the details of the Illinois program, its social equity component, which was initially considered the best in the country, but did it work? Is it effective? So let me pass this off to our moderator, the CIO of Arcview Ventures, and arguably the most popular figure in the cannabis industry, as you'll see, the effervescent Jeanne Sullivan. Take it away, Jeanne.
Aren't you kind? So did you know that Illinois just really created their program January 2020 and have surpassed more than $1 billion in revenue? That includes both the medical and adult use program, but I'd say that's pretty much of a wow, wouldn't you? And here's what's fun. After a long dry spell due to COVID and events, the music festivals have started up again. And the Chicago-based Grant Park had a 4-day music festival in August, and that helped create revenues of more than $128 million. I'd say that's pretty much of a wow, wouldn't you? I must share that I am proud to say I was born in Chicago and spent my first 18 years there. So I feel very connected to this conversation and many trips to Grant Park with my grandmother. So I'm sure that this is really fun, that everything's coming together for Illinois. I am so happy to have this conversation with you today. We have some very active thought leaders and practitioners in the state. You're about to meet, first of all, Joceyln Sheltraw of Headset and Dave Wright of Green Tank. Our goal today is to really bring you thought leadership. First, though, the data, and then we're going to talk to some people who are really in the know. Join me on the stage, please, Joceyln and Dave Wright. So,
hi, Jeanne.
Hi, welcome,
Hey, Jeanne.
both of you. So, Joceyln, I am reading all about you, and your family is actually Native American roots. And you're also tirelessly working as the industry relations director for Headset. You have an amazing background. I looked you up in tech and music. Tell us both about your cannabis journey, your Native American background, share with us, and then talk us through some of the rich data that you and Headset have put together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for mentioning that about my tribe. That's been many 100+ years of effort for my family. But I'm Joceyln. Nice to meet everyone. I see some friendly names in the participant group, so this is great. I've been a part of the cannabis industry for over 3 years, about 3.5 years at this point, and I've been with Headset the entire time. And as Jeanne mentioned, I spent my background really since graduating college. I was working with app developers since the iPhone came out. So I'd been on this ride of a new emerging industry, wild west of an industry that didn't really have any rules to it yet. And I had the time of my life doing that. And so I had been looking at cannabis initially to kind of replicate that career journey. And my world has been completely changed. Just being a part of this community, it is truly an incredible thing to be a part of this industry. It's unprecedented and unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime. And so I'm very happy to be here participating in it. At Headset, what I'm doing is essentially things like this. I'm talking to retailers, brands, investors, policymakers, all around the US and Canada. And I'm explaining what we do at Headset and talking about the trends and how to really incorporate data into business's strategy. And then in my personal life, as Jeanne mentioned, I'm a quarter Kutsetica Paiute. We are one of the 7 tribes of Yosemite Valley in California in the Eastern Sierras. And we are not a federally recognized tribe. And my great-grandmother submitted our application and has been going through the process for over 100 years now. And we finally have a bill in with Congress. And so it's been interesting to see, a lot of Native American tribes are interested in cannabis. And we've seen this in Nevada. We see the Paiutes in Nevada running one of the biggest dispensaries out there. We're seeing this in Washington. So it's sort of this perfect collision of both of my worlds at this point, where I feel like I'm living cannabis and all the things that I care about, all the moments of my day. So I'm just incredibly grateful. But that's a little bit about my background and
that is
why
so
I'm here.
Cool. And just last week we did a Hamptons event, and I had the head of the Shinnecock tribe, because Shinnecocks are going to have the first installation of cannabis in the state of New York. So that's pretty cool. So good for all of you. All right, tell us more.
Cool. Right on. Well, do we want to just jump into the data?
Please.
Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you, Erica, for bringing this up. If we could just, once you get that rolling, head to the next slide. Okay, so as Jeanne mentioned, I'm going to expand a little bit on some of the comments that both Jeanne and Jeffrey had made. But to start, I just want everyone to understand, as I'm kind of going through some of the headset data, it's important to understand what we do, where the data comes from. And so at Headset, we were started by the founders of Leafly 6+ years ago, and we're a cannabis data and analytics software company. I really stress the word software because you're utilizing data, you're understanding the data through different platforms. And so what we're doing is providing a software for dispensaries, pulls in all their point of sale data, analyzes all that data for them, and turns it into these 50 different reports and visualizations that the dispensary is using to manage their inventory and understand who the people are that are coming into their stores and making purchases. And then what we do on the back end is we are aggregating all of this point of sale data. And once we get to a statistically sound enough sample size of data within a state or a province, which generally we need to see somewhere in the 20% mark of all transactions in that market, then we turn on our insights platform, and then we can start providing a real-time read on the market down to the SKU level of what people are purchasing and who's purchasing. And so then producers are really using all of that data to influence what products they make. Retailers are using that data to decide what products to stock on their shelves. And so all of the data that I'm going to be speaking to is going to be real-time data, again, derived directly from the point of sale system in real time. So if we can go to the next slide, Erica. Okay. So, we're all here today because Illinois is such an exciting market. Every single cannabis market has its challenges. But as Jeanne mentioned, recreational cannabis was legalized in January of 2020, and total sales within that year exceeded over $1 billion. And that was about 670 million was coming from recreational sales, 366 million was coming from medical sales. And so at Headset, we did a high-level analysis of sales. And what we saw is that the total cannabis sales have grown by 64% from August of 2020 through August of 2021. And August marks the 6th straight month in a row where recreational sales have exceeded over $100 million, indicating that Illinois is on track to generate over $1 billion in 2021. And so what we're looking at here in this chart, as you can see on the left, we're looking at January 2020. On the right, we're looking at January 2020 or August 2021. And one of the interesting things that we saw in terms of a consumer trend was this shift in the categories. And so what we're seeing here is we can see that some of the categories that had the highest percentage growth of sales is pre-rolls, flower, and beverages. So we can see here in green, we see pre-rolls are doing 66% growth, flower had 44% growth, and beverages saw 38% growth. And so with all of these sales, growing steadily since the launch, one of the other things that we want to think about as an industry is how has pricing changed? Has it stabilized? And what we've seen in Illinois is that prices have remained fairly steady, and they're really ranging from $42 to $44 over the last 18 months, which to us is really a signal that the market has been maturing when pricing is stabilizing like that. So next slide, Erica. Okay, so another interesting thing to see in such a short period of time is that Illinois took in more in tax dollars from cannabis than alcohol for the first time in Q1 of 2021. And so cannabis generated about 86.5 million in recreational tax revenue compared to 72.3 million from liquor sales. So this is just signaling how big of an opportunity cannabis is and how big the market already is. Next slide, please. And as Jeanne mentioned, Lollapalooza, oh my gosh. So, Illinois dispensaries, they had seen a record 128 million in recreational sales in July, which was a 10% increase over June. And this was a big boost that was coming from out-of-state people that were coming to attend Lollapalooza in Chicago. And one of the interesting data points that I read from a friend of ours, Jeanne Technologies, they stated they looked at 18 different dispensaries dispensaries in the Chicago area. And they saw that those stores were having a boost of 50% in sales during the festival. And so even though smoking, of course, isn't permitted at the festival, they did see that pre-rolls saw the biggest increase in sales at 27.5%. Probably not surprising, right? It's obviously a convenient way to consume. A lot of younger people are interested in pre-rolls, so it makes a lot of sense there. Next slide, please. And what's, I think, part in what's attributing to the large sales growth is that, out-of-state residents, right? Out-of-state residents are accounting for about 30% of the total state sales. And this is really due to the fact that cannabis is illegal in 3 out of the 5 states that are bordering Illinois. So Wisconsin, Indiana, Kentucky, Iowa, Missouri, or Wisconsin, Indiana, Kentucky don't have any cannabis at this point, and Iowa and Missouri only allow medical sales. So that's a big benefit to the Illinois market. They're going to see much higher sales because of that. And next slide, please. All right. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that we are actually going to be, the Headset team, along with some of our friends from Arcview, are going to be in Chicago next week, hosting one of our data nights, which is essentially an evening of us bringing the community together to go through some type of an analysis on the market. And one of the things that I'm sure, there's a lot of retailers and brands I see that are on this call. A big thing that we're talking about our industry is brand loyalty, brand affinity. Does it exist today? And so what we're going to be going through is this whole analysis. This is going to be on Tuesday, the 15th. And we're going to be going through a bunch of different brands in the Illinois market, as well as some brands that work in multiple markets, which is a pretty rare thing to see today. And does loyalty exist amongst customers, and kind of how does that work? How should you be thinking about that as a retailer or a brand? So I'll pop the link in, or it looks like Amelia, thank you for doing that, from our team. She's going to be there as well. So come hang with us, learn, connect with other community members, spread word and tell your friends to come join us. But that's a brief little overview. I'll kind of take some questions at the end.
That was great. Good work. Dave, come back to the stage for us and stay on with us, Joceyln.
Okay.
I will bet money that the next time you really show data, let's say it's a year from today and we do this again, that it's got that beverage line way up, because people have finally discovered beverages. And of course, pre-rolls would have a big uptick. How easy is that? Pre-rolls didn't even exist several years ago. So I can see that. Dave, welcome back. You're the Chief Revenue Officer of Green Tank. So what do you think about what you just heard from Joceyln? Does that tick and tie to what you know in Illinois? Talk to us first about your background and journey to cannabis, and then what you think about some of this data for Illinois.
Absolutely. So it's funny, Joceyln, I know we've done a panelist or two before together, and I actually didn't know you came from the app development space. I actually came from the same space. So I spent about 10 years in tech prior to getting into cannabis, and actually ran and operated a multinational app development company for years prior to joining Green Tank. And similar to yourself, the rush of tech and app development and all the new technology led me to kind of find that rush in the cannabis space. And being in Canada, one of the first federally legal countries in the world, really allowed me to jump in head first. So I've been at Green Tank for about 3 years now, leading the sales, marketing, and really everything customer facing up here, based out of Toronto. And then a little bit on Green Tank, just for those that don't know, and why some of the information that Joceyln shared is very relevant to us, is we're a hardware manufacturing company. So we work with brands, small, medium, large, both north and south of the border. May those be MSOs, single state operators, or folks that are just getting off of the ground, to really tailor our hardware in with their oils and their extracts. The piece that really differentiates us from other folks in the market is we actually have an R&D license based here in Canada. So unlike most folks in the space, we're actually able to obtain and handle the oil on site, really allowing us to figure out, how live rosins react, and, CBDs, the crystallization in cartridges and disposable pens. So really exciting to be in the space. And, as Joceyln alluded to, the growth we're seeing not only in flower and pre-rolls, we're also seeing that in vape as well. We've seen a lot of trends shift from what used to be the half gram disposable market over to the full gram cartridge market. which is really interesting. And funny enough, and through a partnership with Arcview and powered by Headset, we put a vape report out last week. We're actually seeing a bit of a comeback in disposables, which was really interesting. Kind of caught a bunch of us off guard, even us at at Green Tank, just to see folks getting back into that SKU set. And the piece that we're really excited about is we're seeing new states come online, and I think Joceyln really hit the nail on the head there with. We see a lot of medical states coming online. They're starting to approve the vape side of things. We're seeing those medical states then transition over into adult use, which is really exciting. And then we're seeing, the states that are kind of looking on the outside, figuring out what they're going to do. And I think we're going to see a bunch more of those fall into medical and adult use over the remainder of 2021.
Very interesting, Dave. Oh, I so envy the fact you're a Canadian and you can ship a product from Vancouver to Nova Scotia. We're just not that enlightened nor progressive here. Hopefully we are heading that way. But oh, wow. It's just amazing what Canada has created. So talk to us about something we talked about in prep for today, are the tariffs, the US tariffs on goods from China. How has that affected a company like yours?
It affects us, but quite frankly, it affects the end user more than ourselves. Where we see it is the sticker shock when working with customers that there's an additional 26.2% added to their subtotal or their final bill. Like many things that get taxed at that level above and beyond any cannabis tax that's out there, is you see it get passed on to the end user. 26% is a large number to be put on top of everything else, and that's on the hardware. So you wouldn't see that in the flower or edible space or beverages, but anything that's manufactured over in China, you do see that tax added to it. Over at Green Tank, we actually have spent the last year and a half working with a provider outside of China. So we spent the better part of a year and a half figuring out all the nooks and crannies of a different manufacturing site to be able to get around the tariff. And by get around, not produce within China. But as many folks on the line would know, a lot of vape hardware is produced directly in the Shenzhen area. So it's going to be interesting. I don't see that tax going anywhere, going away anytime soon. I see it sticking around for the foreseeable future. And it's really, I think, up to us as a community to push back on certain things like that and really make sure that folks are aware that sometimes when you see that price hike, it's tied to government taxes on the back end, tied to something that was manufactured in a different country.
Thank you. Thank you both, Joceyln and Dave. Now stay with us on Backstage if you wish. And let me call to the stage Jared Loadholt, Doug Kelly, Pamela Taylor, and Akele Parnell. While you're coming to the stage, we're going to put up a little survey because these surveys help us understand what you, our wonderful audience, wants. You can move this survey to the side if you want to see our cute faces. You can answer it now or whenever you're ready, and just press submit when you're ready. So move it away, and if you wish, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. It just asks you what's important to you. So first, I want to connect you to our wonderful thought leaders that we have. But wait, you know that $1 billion I was telling you about in revenue? I ask how many of those licenses were social equity licenses? And also, I am in New York City. Are there some lessons learned from the regs of Illinois that we can learn and should pay attention to in New York? As you know, we're slow to create our regs. Hopefully there's going to be movement, and we so seek that here. But we want to do it right, just as Illinois set forth to do it right, as you heard from Jeff. So let's start. First, let's go around, give a brief intro. Jared, you lead off. Tell us about you and what you're doing as partner in Ice Miller.
I'm Jared Loadholt with the law firm Ice Miller, and I'm a partner in our public affairs and our cannabis practice. Ice Miller is a full-service law firm, and in our cannabis space, we're developing a comprehensive kind of suite of services for every person, every entity that's in the supply chain in the cannabis industry. And that's from lobbying and advocacy work in Washington and in state capitals. My background was started in cannabis finance and banking years ago as a staff from the House Committee on Financial Services, where very early on predecessors to the SAFE Act. We got a chance to work on those. And so part of our work is also advising financial institutions and helping them understand how do you bank this industry. But it's also, these are companies that have labor and employment issues. They have immigration issues. They have technology and intellectual property issues. So I think like a lot of law firms, I think Ice Miller, we had a background in alcohol regulation and gaming. And those were two areas that kind of lent themselves to being a leader in cannabis, and that this is also a largely state regulated and licensed product. And it is one where states tend to, I'd say, kind of they put goalposts up, right? And they gatekeep a bit around the industry. And I think that's kind of how people navigate these highly regulated industries. And I think as the federal government catches up to the states, we'll see more of the FDA and other players in Washington kind of play a role. And so our agribusiness and our FDA practice, I think, will come into play in the future. So we're looking around the corner, I think, around cannabis, and we see a really robust kind of regulatory framework that is both state, federal, and local, right? Because you've got land use and zoning ordinances, for example, that limit where you can actually do business in places like Illinois.
Sure.
And in Chicago.
We'll come back because I want to press on some of those. Let's keep going around. Doug, go ahead and introduce yourself. You formed the Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition. Give us a one-liner about what you're working on.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Douglas Kelly. I'm Executive Director of the Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition. We are a 501c3 organization dedicated to justice, equity, and inclusion in the cannabis industry. And we're working through our three pillars of business, legislation, and community. And we're focusing on licensing, making sure that Illinois does exactly what it said it was to help those who was mostly harmed by the war on drugs.
Thank you. Pamela, to you. Introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. And hello, Jeanne. Thank you for having me on the panel. My name is Pamela Taylor, and I have a marketing consulting firm here in Illinois called the MAP Group, which stands for Marketing, Advertising, and Promotion. And I started my company in 2005, working with various corporations, but in 2016, I actually had a sorority sister who was physically impacted by breast cancer. And I actually tried to get medical cannabis for her to help her symptoms, and was not able to get the resources that she needed. And that really became part of my quest into the industry. And I really leveraged my product development and marketing background to help clients who were in the CBD industry. And then with the burgeoning, opportunity here in Illinois, decided to be able to help clients develop their applications for cannabis dispensaries.
Thank you so much, Akele. Certainly, you are the envy of many of our listeners on today, of which we are so proud that we have many hundred. So thank you all for joining us. But you have won 2 craft licenses and a dispensary license, and just recently. And so give us a quick walk around the block on your great background.
Yeah, thanks. So I won a craft grow and a dispensary license. I'm also head of equity partnerships at Lantern, which is an e-commerce and home delivery platform. So excited about that. Been in the cannabis industry since 2018. I got started as an in-house deal attorney at Green Thumb Industries. And so, I've been just deep into the cannabis industry, and also a board member of the Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition at Chicago Normal. So I've sort of seen all different sides of it.
Thank you so much. Jared, back to you. I like the way you said you as a firm need to keep looking around the corner. I also like the fact that you connected, the big banking regulatory world that you've lived in. I see you've had some incredible clients, et cetera, and now into cannabis. So tell us more. Was it a struggle for Ice Miller to decide we're going to do cannabis? I love quickly sharing that back in 2014, we needed just an administrative matter, went to a top 100 law firm. It took them 4 months to figure out if they'd even take this on. So I guess times have changed, right? Give us that journey for your firm, because that's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's not. It wasn't hard at all. Because I think we saw a natural transition from the work that we were already doing in gaming and alcohol regulation. and real estate. So again, I think there were certain areas where we had kind of a natural competency, and this just lent itself to cannabis. And I think, we had the relationships in certain key states where it made sense. So no, and not at all. I think the firm bought in, the firm leadership was there. We call ourselves Vice Miller in some places because I think we do so many of the vices that people seem to like. But it just seemed like a burgeoning industry that firms that played well in the space of state regulatory work would be natural partners in that work.
Sure, and especially since you're so predominant in the Midwest, how are you dealing with even, contiguous states that aren't adopting either legislatively or certainly not ballot initiatives? How do you view that? Is there work you can do that you are doing to educate? Talk
Absolutely.
to us about that. Yeah.
So we're actively engaged in Ohio adult use expansion legislation, very engaged. And so we're having the conversations in the state capitals where we're the strongest. And I think that's in Indiana and that's in Ohio right now because Illinois has already done the right thing. I think the beauty of having an Illinois in the region is you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to recreate the wheel. And so oftentimes I think in those conversations we're having in Columbus, in Indianapolis, we're pointing to Springfield and we're pointing to Chicago as examples of what to look to. But yeah, no, I mean, look, anytime this stuff doesn't happen overnight. I mean, this is a years long fight to not only create a cannabis industry, but also one that's equitable, which I think there's still a lot of work to do. And I think, Illinois, and I think that's another part of our work where we're not just trying to get people into an industry, but we're trying to help grow an equitable cannabis industry as well. So, again, Chicago and Illinois, I think have been incredible examples for the rest of the region, and hopefully they'll follow suit.
Well, let's talk about that, Doug Kelly. Here you formed this not-for-profit, so interesting. And I learned from you about know your rights, which I think is so important, and the expungement work you're doing. Talk to us about that. Explain both of those worlds and issues that you're working on. You on mute, Doug? Doug, you're on mute. That's going to be the line of the year, the last 2 years, right? Okay,
Thank
there
you,
you
Jeanne.
go. All right, start over.
For this opportunity to talk about Know Your Rights. As it became apparent that, when it became legal, the first thing the coalition thought about was like, okay, we need to make sure that our communities are still informed of what their rights are and the things they can and cannot do. So we put together a campaign of just going around to the community members and explaining, passing out literature about what the cannabis legalization means to them. First, we started out with what you can and how much you can carry. So that was very important so you don't continue to be criminalized by it. And then we went into the housing aspect of it. Just because it is legal here in Illinois, it's still not legal federally. So landlords can still, evict you for using cannabis in their apartments if they so see fit. No federal buildings still don't allow any cannabis in their buildings. So we want to make sure that everybody understand that just because it's legal, that you cannot consume whenever you want. Certain walkways and municipality buildings, you still can't even smoke in front of. So we just want to make sure we educate as many people as we can around those things. And then the next thing was employment. Even though some of the employment companies here are now beginning to say they're not going to test for cannabis, there's still a lot of companies that will. So you still have to be aware what your policy is with your HR person, what they can and cannot do. Then we went to immigration. That's another very important key. Explain to the immigrants, what they can and can't do as well. We don't want anybody to continue to be harmed or victimized just because they want to enjoy the plant and even for medical reasons. So there's a lot of work to still need to be done here in Illinois, but we're taking this up and we're going to continue to fight to the end. And then on the expungement side of it, that was the next thing we really took a look at. This whole cannabis thing in Illinois was built on, was going to make the people that was mostly impacted by the war on drugs, be able to not only get work in this industry, but be an owner in this industry. So far, we have failed at that, but we're going to continue to work on it. So far this year, we have, first you have to start your rap sheet to get your record expunged. So we host quarterly. Well, now we're moving to every other month because the demand is so high about helping people get their records cleared, record clearing process. First, you have to get your rap sheet. Go ahead.
Go on.
First, you have to get your rap sheet, and then we partner with Legal Aid Chicago, which is a non-for-profit organization that help people clear their records as well. Then we also pay for people to get the transportation to and from CPD is where they have to get their fingerprints done. We have already helped over 150 people this year at getting the process started. On September 24th, which is a part of National Expungement Week, we'll be hosting another Rap Sheet Day where we'll be taking 50 more people in to get their record processes started. We do understand that expungement is just a small process. It is a start. It's a critical first step to getting the people that was mostly harmed by the war on drugs, the ability to even get into this industry. We host wraparound events where we help people get the basic necessities, things like washing powder, soap, and things like that. And we do this all from just volunteer and people donations and things like that. So we are very in tune with, make sure that the community comes first in this. And as people move, as these businesses move into our community, we want them to be good partners. And that's why we create the CBA as well, Community Benefits Agreement, where we went to all the existing operators when they got their +1. When I say +1, they got a recreation dispensary because they were in medical. So we went to each one of those and put before for CBA. We had 2 people who actually agreed to the CBA. One is very much operational, as it's been a huge success. And in that CBA, we talked about what would be a good neighbor. So what we did is we put together a list of things, made sure they're hiring people from the DIA areas. 80% of their people are hired from DIA areas. Then we talked about they're giving 10% of their profits back to the community that was mostly impacted by the war on drugs. So we put together a whole community benefits agreement like that.
That's very impressive. Many of the people listening to this today may want to help you educate, may want to be part of what you're doing, may want to benefit from some of these programs. So feel free to put your email or some way to reach you or your organization. What wonderful work. So good for you. Pamela, to you. You have been very instrumental in helping people find their way on applications. I know that's not easy. Tell us about some of the recent dispensary licenses you've been able to achieve. How hard was that? How easy? Talk to us about the process.
Sure. Well, the one thing in particular is the fact that Illinois it was brimming with excitement at the premise of legalization. And in particular, the actual licensing process, there was the premise of, having people who might be first-time, entrepreneurs, the opportunity to enter into the market. In particular, as Jeff noted at the beginning, social equity applicants in particular. Right now, Illinois is really at the intersection of good intentions, but really challenging implementation. So initially, there were supposed to be 75 licenses that were issued. There were 4,000 applicants. And out of that, 700 groups participated in 4,000 applications. On May the 1st, those applications were supposed to be selected and revealed. What we found within the interim of all of this is the fact that, there were many corporations that actually had kind of, a false ownership. There was scoring inequities that took place as well. And all of this led to numerous lawsuits that have actually mired the entire process. So here we sit at September the 1st, and their licenses haven't actually been issued. So there's been 185 actual licenses selected, but they are still in limbo. There have been to date 3 lotteries that have been held. And there is now a 4th lottery for provisional to address all of the corrective issues. Had it not been for organizations like the Cannabis Equity Coalition and Chicago NORML and EAT, and very diligent legislators, we wouldn't be at this particular process now with 185, applicants waiting. They actually created a special provision law, which was HB 1443, that actually created additional licensing opportunity, and it went from 75 to actually 110. So now there's 185 licenses that are in play for 2021, but there's still the opportunity for all of these applicants to make a decision if they can actually go forward. For many of them, the application process was a tumultuous task. They had to bootstrap, the fees to actually be able to apply. And if you were a social equity applicant, the fees were actually lowered to $2,500 in order to make the barrier to entry a more affordable pathway. But for many people who are starting in the process, if you've never done an application, you really need guidance. And that was actually the service that I was able to do for my particular clients in addressing, some of the community engagement pieces of it and leveraging the marketing and business development side of it. But for many individuals, they didn't have those resources and they struggled through the process. So, we've got a lot of people who are very excited about being in the industry, but certainly need the resources on the financial end and the business development end to really stand up a business.
Thank you for that insight. With the mess you just described, are there still more licenses to be gained or had or applied for yet this year? Are there still opportunities?
So there's going to be a fourth lottery that will take place. That is actually a corrective measure with a TBD date. We still don't know when that will take place. And there are other lawsuits that are in place that potentially are holding up the distribution of those 185 licenses. That's all the licenses that will be distributed for this year. But it's certainly the hope that, from the scoring process to even the veterans clause, that really became a strong point of contingency for a lot of litigation. These matters really need to be addressed along with a rubric that is easy to follow and a process that certainly allows the greatest opportunity encouragement for social equity applicants to be a part of the process.
Thank you for that. Wow, it's so interesting. These complexities, we don't want them to stand in the way of progress. So Akele, as mentioned, you're certainly the envy of many listening. How wonderful. You have a great background. I can see why you were a winner. And, just to key off of what Pamela just shared with us, this lottery that was scored first, though, right? The lottery wasn't just random, is it? Aren't there some capabilities that one has to prove in first? That'd be curious to know.
Yeah, so the scoring process for dispensary licenses, I'll speak on that first. So it was a competitive application process. And so, initially before the passage of HB 1443, it was going to be the highest score. So whoever had the highest score, win the licenses. If there's a tie in the highest scores, among the highest scores, however you sort of want to define that, then there would be a lottery for the ties if there were more ties than available licenses. And so that's how we initially got the lottery concept over a year ago. And then, of course, that the law was amended to create additional licensing opportunities. And instead of requiring the highest score for the last two lotteries, or at least actually the first two lotteries, was sort of switched the order around, you only needed a threshold score of 85%. So still, sort of competitive application process where you needed 85% to make the lottery and be social equity. So that's what we saw. And then, they did the lottery and they published the results of the lottery, but they can't award the licenses until the judge in a particular case makes a decision at the end of the month. He's been saying that he's going to make the final decision for a few weeks now. So fingers crossed that, he finally does at the end of the month, and then we can move on with the business of running some dispensaries.
So one thing that, because it's complicated, I think people would enjoy hearing what is a craft license, and then go into what does a dispensary license include. So talk us through both of those.
Yeah, for sure. So the craft license is a cultivation license. It's comparable to the full-scale sort of cultivation license, but it's a craft model. And so smaller flowering canopy in particular. And so initially it's limited to 5,000 square feet of flowering space, and then you can expand up to 14,000 square feet of flowering space under the existing law. There's no cap on, your veg and your nursery and all that other stuff. And it also includes processing and extraction and processing. And so you can pretty much, make, any sort of cannabis products that you can make under the law with the craft license. Is just, limited production capacity, specifically with respect to flowering space.
So wait, press on that. So you get to have a grow operation, but can you also do some manufacturing?
Yep, it includes manufacturing. And there's no cap on it.
So you could make beverages if you wanted to, pre-rolls as well as other, so that's pretty cool. So it includes both, but not retail, right?
Yeah, so the craft license is only for production. It doesn't include retail. So you need a separate retail license for that.
Is it limited to social equity applicants?
Not, practically yes, but technically no. The licenses went to the highest scoring applicants, and it just so happened that the highest scoring applicants were social equity applicants. So
that's pretty great. So maybe my opening rhetorical question: how do we turn some of this revenue into some of the social equity world? Do you think that's possible? Is that happening? Do you think there's going to be a opportunity for that?
Oh, absolutely. It is happening. There's certainly a lot of unintended consequences that we've seen as a result of the law and some of the ways that we crafted the social equity program and the licensing process. And certainly it leaves a lot to be desired and things to be fixed. But, hindsight is always 2020. We certainly made a significant improvement over other states and other social equity programs. And hopefully, it looks like New York has learned from some of our mistakes. And so look forward to seeing what they do there. But there's certainly an opportunity, and there certainly will be some wealth built, through this process. And we'll see, new Black and brown and social equity businesses in the Illinois marketplace. So that's exciting. It certainly could have been better. But again, it's hard to anticipate all this stuff, and given the political process and everything just gets really challenging.
So what are some of your challenges ahead? Certainly you're going to want investment. Certainly you're going to want people around you, processes, et cetera. Tell us more about that, because it's interesting to learn that, especially at your stage. You're just starting off.
Yeah, so our team is pretty experienced, and so we got pretty lucky. I wrote our applications and sort of knew how to do that, and so we were lucky on that front, and had a lot of experience in the industry working for other companies, and have some folks with legacy experience and all that stuff. So that's great. We're in the process of raising capital. Doing our analysis on our current facility and property for our cultivation facility, and make sure we got the right fit, and then looking at some other options. But capital raising is number one, and we got some. We need more, especially for the grow. And so we're sort of making our rounds with different investors. We want the right investors, not just any money. We want the right terms. We want strategic partners. Ideally, folks that can bring more than capital, but certainly want those capital partners as well.
You won 2 craft licenses. Can the operation be conjoined, or they have to be in 2 separate locations?
So we won 1 craft license, but we might be taking on another one or partnering with another craft license. But right now they can't be co-located. That's something that we would like to see change in the law, where you could operate, but that would save us a lot of money. And then of course, economies of scale and all that just make the business a lot more viable and competitive for social equity folks in particular. So that's something we're going to push for. And I know everybody on this call supports that. What you can do is co-locate the dispensary and the cultivation in the craft grow.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting. What you cannot do, did you say?
You can.
You can do. Okay, but you can't own the retail part of it, right?
No, yeah, well, that's part of the condition. Is if you want to co-locate them, then they have to share at least 50% of the same ownership, and ours does. And so theoretically, we could give a sort of craft brewery experience where, you go to Four Hands Brewing, or I probably messed up the name, but that craft brewery, and you can have a beer, and you can also, I don't know if we can get to the point where you can see how cannabis is made. We're not going to be there yet, but one day that's the sort of idea that so you could theoretically have a dispensary at the same location or the same property as you have your cultivation facility, or like a Lagunitas is a great example. So
some of the questions from our audience are about what other licenses are available. Can you speak to that? Some of the other licensing?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the Of course, the dispensary license, there's the craft cultivation license, there's the process or infusion license, which essentially allows you to, source product or extracted product from cultivators and then create, beverages or edibles and things like that, tinctures and all that. Can't do extraction with it, but, that's another license category. There's a transporter license. And then there's also, depending on the municipality you're in, the consumption license, which you got to have a dispensary license or got to be a smoke shop under the state law in order to do social consumption. And then you got to be a standalone building to allow smoking, and your municipality has improved it and all that. But those are like the main categories. I might have.
But that social consumption world hasn't quite kicked in yet for Illinois, right?
I think there's one somewhere downstate. I haven't been to it. I heard that there was one in Champaign before too. So I think there might be two, but I haven't seen either one of them. So.
Okay, so that's coming. And certainly Chicago area would be a pretty great place for that, right? I learned from you about the zoning issues, and that has been so predominant in many other states. Talk to us about that. What did you have to fight through or think about on zoning, and what should future license owners think about in Illinois?
Yeah, well, the big challenge with zoning, especially as someone that lives in Chicago, is can you locate your, your cultivation, your craft cultivation facility in Chicago or your dispensary in Chicago, given all the, sort of zoning challenges right now. And so the main challenge is that there's not enough, the zoning classifications for cannabis businesses are too limited right now. So there's not enough locations for all of the licensees in the Chicago BLS region. And so you saw that with the medical operators when they got their +1s, as Doug talked about, their additional dispensary, and they went through the lottery process. Chicago has a lottery process. It's probably going away. There's a new ordinance that the city is considering right now to sort of change a lot of that and make it, make zoning a lot more accessible or easier for social equity businesses. But, there's a lottery process. You had to get a special use permit for all of these. If you wanted to do more than that, you could, get a zoning change. There's just a lot of hurdles to opening your business in the city of Chicago. So that's one of the things you had to think about is, it's really attractive here. Rent is high, but it's Chicago, and, it's an influential city in the US and certainly the most influential in the state. And so when you think about building a brand, a lot of folks would want to be in Chicago, but given the hurdles and the amount of money and challenges, it may not always make sense. So that's something that we had to think about and navigate, and especially for the application process. How much money do you want to spend on securing a location for a lot of money in the city of Chicago, dealing with all the zoning stuff and the cost of real estate when you may not even win the license? So.
Yeah, that's always tough. And oftentimes you have to pay for that lease if it's a leasehold. So that is tough. So give us some parting words of wisdom to future license seekers. You start first, Akele, but Pam and Doug weigh in on that, because I think people long for that. What do I have to do? What should I do now? What should I think about? And that goes not only for Illinois, but potentially other states. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, it's a lot of work. It's way more work than it seems like. I mean, I would stand up till like every night, like almost all night, working on applications and doing stuff and figuring stuff out. So it's a ton of work. So you got to know yourself. And then you also got to know your team. And so maybe you don't have all the pieces in place just in your immediate circle. So you got to network and find the right people. Try to be cost effective, especially in the application process. Folks blew hundreds of thousands, if not collectively millions of dollars trying to get these licenses. I get it. But you got to be smart about how you use all that money. And then to realize that the business is really hard. And I know a lot of people say that as a thing, but I haven't been in it. It can be fun. It can also be extremely frustrating and is extremely hard. And you're not guaranteed at this point to walk away as a millionaire. Some folks will, and a lot of folks will, and I want to continue to see that. But a lot of cannabis businesses actually don't do that well across the country. So that's something that people need to realize too. But tons of opportunity. If you really want it, understand what it means to get it, and then go after it.
Thank you. Feel free to put your email in if you wish, if you want people to reach you, because we want to do this for you too, to make things work for you. Pamela, what thoughts do you have? What words of wisdom?
I think there's two components to really look at. On the legislative side, I would really tell people who are in other states like New York or Maryland to really look at the other states like Illinois look at the challenges that have been experienced, and really implement a checklist system, almost like buying the home process. So that way, that gives people an opportunity who are not familiar with the application process, and to Akele's point, can be very daunting, to make sure the fact that they get it right, from rubrics to even the evaluation process, or including social equity causes. There really has to be things where I's are dotted and T's are crossed in a timeline that's actually doable, and with strong infrastructure and implementation to actually see it through. On the application side, it's really important to build a team. This is not a task that you can take on as an individual. And so you want to make sure that you have, an attorney as a part of your team, an accountant, because as you're doing various aspects of this application, they're going to ask you for, experience, or, they're going to ask you for retail establishment, HVAC plans that you might not have expertise in. And I actually saw one of the comments in the chat, hire consultants. You definitely want to have consultants who are helping you get through that process, but also make sure that you have the funding as well, because not only the application, but if you are lucky enough to get awarded, what it costs to actually stand up a business is very financially, it's a large undertaking. And so I would tell people to really look at other states and do your homework. Don't try to be a hero, but definitely look at the examples that other people have done. And if you're able to connect with people like Akele, connect with the social equity organizations, because they can become tremendous resources to actually getting you to the finish line.
That's great. Doug, anything to add?
Yeah, pretty much what they said, but also for the state of New York, make sure you guys include the advocacy groups in your discussion about how you're shaping that landscape. A lot of time, politicians go at it alone without getting the inputs they need, especially when you start talking about equity within industry. They really do need to listen to the people that's on the ground doing the work. And like Pam said, you have to educate yourself and find your funding up front. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, they won, and then it was a mad scramble, like, oh, what do I do next? And do a better job for your state is just making sure the technical assistance is there to help them along this process. I think that's where we kind of missed the ball as well.
And so that's what I wanted to end with in our last couple minutes. Here we are, I am in New York City. As you all know, we've been slow to adopt, but make no mistake, New York will definitely be number 2 in volume, and some are saying potentially surpass California because of, you do know that New York is the largest illicit market in the world. People smoke here and want product, and they want it to be legal. And thank God the legalization got inked, but now finally the regs have a chance to be produced over the next several months, we believe, as the 2 latest directors were just announced. What can we learn from Illinois in New York? First of all of you should go and call on our new heads so they can learn the lessons. But are there lessons that come to mind? Jared, feel free to weigh in on this too. What can we learn from Illinois? How could we capitalize on both the social equity issues as well as the opportunity, do things right? By the way, I must share that women are considered social equity applicants in New York, and social consumption lounges were built into the statute. So we like both of those. But give us some thoughts in closing, because we need it. We want it to be great. Can it be great?
Yeah, no, I think parting thoughts. I mean, look, I think one of the challenges in Illinois is things are still mired in litigation, I think, because people who applied don't feel like they got a fair shake. And so I think a part of it kind of stemmed from, consulting firms. I think they were a part of the scoring process. So the scoring process is really key in making sure you get that right. Because if you don't, every license people will sue, right? So I think making sure the scoring process is clean and clear and transparent is key. I think with equity, someone noted about co-location. One of the things that everybody noted here was the costs associated with getting in the door in the first place, right? And so things that reduce those costs, like allowing people to co-locate so they don't have to carry a lease for God knows how long before they actually are able to make money, I think is a really big deal. A collective ownership, I think, is another piece where allowing people to explore really thoughtful ways of organizing a corporate entity to collectively own these assets and operate them, I think is another way to do that. So I think there are lots of ways to kind of help encourage equity. But Illinois, I think, is the first step, I think, in the right direction. But there's always work to do on the equity side because it still costs way too much to get in and to even submit an application, which would by definition exclude people who are the hardest hit by the war on drugs.
There's no doubt, and thank you for that. You know, I see we're out of time, but as Jeff told you at the start of this conversation, we have several events coming up, so check our website, and we want you to join us. Look to our website, and they list all those events. I welcome you to reach out to any of our wonderful speakers today, and also feel free to fill out the survey that you saw earlier, and we look forward to seeing you in person in Las Vegas if you're so inclined. Thank you so much for today and being part of us. And thank you to our wonderful speakers. Thank you.